Thank you so much for accepting. I'm so much in awe of your work.
Oh, thank you.
I just finished reading your book today, as a matter of fact.
Oh,
I was absolutely spellbound. I'll be recommending it to everybody who asks me what they should read next.
thank you
But
so
we'll be
much.
discussing that when the session really begins.
Okay. So
In about,
is that Tiger Girl?
it is Tiger Girl, absolutely so. My God, what a book! I was absolutely bowled over by that book. And like I said, I just finished reading it this morning, so it's very fresh in my mind.
Yes. Thank
And
you.
and there is so much to so many layers, so many intersecting themes.
Yeah.
All kind of. So we'll discuss that.
Yeah.
So today's session is just going to be, less of me and more of you. So it's going to
Yes.
be. I'll just read out your bio, ask you a few questions about the book, and then it's going to be all readings from Tiger Girl, if that suits you.
Okay. So I worked out about a half-hour reading. Is that about right?
That's wonderful. It's
Yeah.
that's exactly what that would be really good. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So are you going to do the questions first or just a couple of
Yeah, I
just
think uh,
questions
I think that I would love to do the questions interspersed with
interspersed?
poems,
Okay.
so
So I'll
that
stop in between poems and check. Yeah.
if that works for you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we
No,
can do the questions first,
no,
and we
no.
can just.
It's good. It's good to have a break from poems because they're intense listening.
Yes, yes. So great, and so it's almost time.
Okay,
So
so
why don't we begin now that we are both here?
yes, sure.
And by the way, this session will also be recorded and
Hmm.
put on YouTube. So I'll be sending you the link to that as well.
Okay,
So
yes.
that for your archival, for your website or for other reasons of archival. But
Okay.
so let's begin. Let's start. Hello everybody. Welcome to another Pen at Prithvi session. Whether you're watching us now or you'll be watching us on YouTube later, welcome. As you know, Pen at Prithvi is a fortnightly program, uh, in which we speak to writers from India and beyond, writing in English and other languages. And today we are very, very honored to have with us Pascale Petit. I hope I've pronounced that. I hope I
You
haven't mangled your
did.
name.
Absolutely right.
And thank you. And she is, of course, a very, very eminent poet. And I've just finished reading her latest book, Tiger Girl, and I was absolutely blown away by it. Let me quickly read out her brief biographical note before we get into the session. Born in Paris, Pascale Petit grew up in France and Wales. She now lives in Cornwall. Pascale is of French, Welsh, and Indian heritage. Her eighth collection, Tiger Girl, published by Blood Axe in 2020, was shortlisted for the Forward Prize for Best Collection, and a poem from the book won the Keats Shelley Poetry Prize. Her seventh poetry collection, Mama Amazonica, published by Blood Axe in 2017, won the RSL Ondaatje Prize in 2018 and the inaugural Laurel Prize in 2020. It was shortlisted for the Roehampton Poetry Prize and was a Poetry Book Society choice. Her sixth collection, Fowlery, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Was her fourth to be shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize, and a portfolio of poems from this book won the 2013 Manchester Poetry Prize. In 2018, she was appointed Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, and she has won a bunch of awards. She has also chaired she has also been one of the judges for the T.S. Eliot Prize, and her books have been translated into several languages. Welcome to Pen at Prithvi.
Thank you very much.
And
Hello, everybody.
it is we live in strange times. We are not able to greet you and welcome you to Mumbai in real life. So we are meeting in this virtual realm, particularly because in Tiger Girl, your connection to India comes through very, very strongly.
Yes, yes. my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, was Indian, although it was a secret during her life. And she was born and spent her childhood in India. And so I decided to write this book that I at last needed to go there. And the biggest story that she always told me was of meeting a tiger when she was a baby. So I really wanted to see tigers, and I did, and I wish I were there again.
Where did you see
Yes.
tigers in
I
India?
went I went to 3 national parks. First of all, I went to Ranthambore, and then I went to Kana in Madhya Pradesh, and then to Bandhavgarh. And then I went back to India and spent all the time in Bandhavgarh that time, and mainly in Tala zone, the central zone, where I came very close to a tigress, just like my grandmother.
How wonderful. How absolutely wonderful. Which
Oh.
which brings me very nicely to my next question, which is, could you just walk us through the inception of this book? It's never a wholly logical, cold, rational operation to bring together a collection. But if you could just lead us through a little bit of the process through which this collection has taken shape.
Yes, thank you for asking that. I started by wanting to imagine what my grandmother's life was like, um, and her extraordinary story that she was the daughter of her father's maid, but she was taken in by his white family, and so I started trying to read up all about tigers, really, because of the story that she told me about the tiger. And I have a big thing about big cats anyway. I'd written about jaguars for a couple of books, so it was quite a big deal for me, and I felt I was betraying jaguars, but actually, tigers are just incredible and so powerful. So they were certainly equal to the jaguars. And yeah, so I started by reading all the Jim Corbett books, and finding out about the history of India and what it was like around the time that my grandmother would have been born in 1906. And then at last I went there. So as soon as I went there, I then started to write about not just the tigers, but the incredible wildlife, the birds. I mean, I'd actually not known very much about Indian wildlife. I was very knowledgeable about the Amazon rainforest, and I'd been there many times, but to discover that you go into the forest and there are so many deer and different types of deer. There's so many, the monkeys everywhere, the way that they help each other against the tiger. And I never saw a leopard, which was something I was hoping to do, and hoping to go to Nagaholi this year, but obviously that got put on hold. But all the birds and the color, and I kind of really discovered why my grandmother used to dress up as a gypsy and tell fortunes and wear all these colors, and why I wear colors. So it was a real journey of discovery, not just of the fauna and flora of India, but also of my heritage and what's kind of, lurking in the background there.
Yes, and it's wonderful that you should say that, because one of the things that struck me in such a powerful, vivid way about your collection is that is the intersection of the personal with eco poetry, uh, the, the personal trauma with a historical trauma, it works at so many levels, but always there is this interplay between the personal and the larger.
Yes.
And it's absolutely beautifully set up by the very first poem in your collection, which deals directly with the story that you were mentioning, does it not?
Yes. Yes. So that's kind of the gate into the forest, because
Yes.
it describes the story, the family secret, and the colors. And I lived with my grandmother. She brought me up, in fact, because her life was traumatic, but so was mine, my childhood. And I lived with her when I was a baby, and then when I was a child. So she was really my mother. Um, and Yes, so I guess the more that I found out about India too, the more trauma I realized that there was. Obviously, there is trauma with Indian people, but and the colonialism, but also with the wildlife and the poaching and the terrible things that went on, especially about 10 years ago. I think the situation is much better now, and there are more tigers, but this situation was, really, really bad. And of course, it's still bad for elephants and for various other creatures.
Absolutely. The less photogenic ones, as the saying goes,
Yes,
are the ones that to be ignored
yes.
or mistreated. But I would really, it would be wonderful if you could please read out that first poem, if you
I,
feel like it at all.
yes, I'll do that. I'll read that from the screen.
Thank you so
Her
much.
gypsy clothes. I used to wonder why my grandmother stared so hard into the fire, even after I found the cardboard box at the back of the coal house and drew out of it flame, chili, emerald, sequin sparks, embroidered mirrors orbiting wraparound skirts, shawls trimmed with seed pearls, silver bangles like Saturn's rings. Her embarrassment when she caught me trying them on and explained they were her gypsy rags to tell fortunes at fairs. Only at her funeral did the story come out. Her birth in Rajasthan to her father's maid. I think now of my great grandmother dancing for her master's guests, grateful to have her baby brought up as his wife's. I think of the coal grease, black dust, and memories that burn slow as anthracite. How some colors don't fade, however deep they're buried. How even a dowry of rags, smoldering in a box, can flare in a winter grate. And how to own the country of her birth, a woman might have to wear a fire.
That was amazing. That
Thank
was
you.
truly amazing. It was hard. It sets up the whole thing in motion. It's really an engine which sets the whole collection moving with a grand sweep. And thank you so much for reading it out. And yeah, so and one of the things that also keeps happening in the collection to keep up with the theme of your grandmother is that her life is brought into greater detail, but it's mixed up with other things, so that it's not a uniform movement. It's a multiple movement. It isn't just a play. It's even the progression of her life in the collection is told slant.
Yes, yes,
And of course other themes come in. There is of course the environmental degradation of India, of Indian
yes,
wildlife.
yeah,
There is the fate of the tiger, but also patriarchy and colonialism and and child abuse, they all come together to sort of, with, if it's a wheel, then the grandmother's archetypal figure is the kind of spoke that holds everything together, in a sense, is it not?
Yes, yes, the kind of great mother and the
Yes,
forest. She's
yes,
the forest.
yes. And so many poems in this collection, wonderful collection. She becomes a tiger, she becomes a forest woman, she becomes some sort of a tree, kind of tree being, a bird. So it's like, uh, it reminds me of the great myths, in a sense, as well, this sort of treatment of this character in the collection.
Hmm. I'm so pleased to hear that. Thank you so much. Shall I read
Yes,
Her
please.
Tigress Eyes, maybe?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you so much.
So this is when I went back to live with her when I was 7. I'd lived with her from the time I was born until 2.5, then gone back to Paris, and then I was brought back to her in mid Wales. Her tigress eyes. When I met you that first evening, and I was a 7-year-old perched on your settee, not understanding English, all I could see was your eyes. I also sensed the Queen of India in a double exposure, the summer sky reflected in her irises, sapphire glints from her father, blue eyes among golden groves of rods and cones. Behind the tigress, your black eyes glistened with forest ferns. Birds nested between them. Your glasses made your living room a fairy green. Did I dream awake, or was I hallucinating after the night crossing and long drive to Wales, or the surprise of being left in a place where I could start to sprout roots? Perhaps I recalled being here before as a baby, because however unfamiliar it felt with the strange language, the animals that surrounded us as if I'd landed in paradise, I knew I was back home. Your eyes told me this when you looked at me, your hands making the sign for food and milk, just as a tigress attends to her cub, licks her of dangerous scents, and brings her spirit deer from the meadow, then over the years, through example, goes on to teach her how to hunt for herself, how to survive among the teeth and claws she will have to one day battle. 7 years I thrived in your warmth, and at the end you battered me away to go find my own territory, my own strength.
Absolutely, absolutely beautiful. Sheltering warmth and kindness, but also kind of tough love.
Yes, it is tough love. And I really, it was kind of based because my grandmother did have to throw me out when I was 14, and because she couldn't cope anymore with teenagers. And I kind of linked that with how tigresses are such wonderful mothers. They would die for their cubs, and then when the cubs reach maturity, they fight each other to the death. And but partly this is because there isn't enough forest, so they're fighting over territory. So
How tragic, but also, yes, yes.
maybe I should now read the long poem in the forest, do you think?
Sounds like a wonderful idea.
Okay, I think I'll read that from the screen because it's quite long. In the forest. In the forest, I saw a man sewing an owl's eyes shut. The owl was on a leash and the man pulled it to make it flutter and attract songbirds to mob his decoy. He told me how much he could earn from warblers in cages. I wondered which was worse, the blind eagle owl or thrushes glued to sticks. The deeper I went, the more I saw. What is worse, asked the sky, a girl with sewn eyes or glued lips? The deeper I walked, the harder I looked, although it was dark and there were no stars. 4,000 rupees for a barn owl to be sacrificed for Diwali, to light up the dark with dark. I went even deeper into the core, patrolled by forest guards on tuskers, but it was night and the bulls were chained. I saw another man who led me to a cave, which he called his vault, and there was a tigress inside, giving birth to striped gold. I said, my eyes a stitch and my lips sealed, and he placed coins in my hand, said it was jungle currency. And I knew then I was holding the eyes of cubs. I said to the poacher, I'm not from here, I do not judge, but the eyes muled in my hands. So I ran through every coppice and every clearing and looked at the moon whose eye was sewn shut. I passed the firefly tree and the flame of the forest, and I swear there were leopards dangling from their boughs. I came to the crocodile bark tree and the ghost tree as the first rays peered through night's lids, but the sun couldn't look at what I had seen. The sun couldn't wake the sambar, cheetal, antelope, or gazelle. So I was the only witness of those luminous herds with fire trees on the altars of their brows, all sacrificed for good fortune. Goddess Lakshmi, forgive them as you ride your owls. And that was long ago now, but still I'm running through that forest, watched by the moon eye and the sun eye. But now it's a forest of peeling red bark, of leopards with paws sawn off, stuffed into pockets for luck. While in the tantric market, a trader slices a tiger, giving it new stripes, one stripe for a lakh of rupees. I run through thickets of dust trees until I reach the realm of the sloth bear, where a cub clings to his electrocuted mother. And here I find a man laughing as he hooks a cane through the cub's nose and teaches him to dance. The night is black as bear fur, its muzzle bleeding after eating honey baited with explosives. How many rupees for the galaxies in a gallbladder? I run more slowly now, afraid of traps for my ankles, snares for my neck. You could say my flight is a jerky dance, the stars my audience with shielded eyes, because the ringmaster has arrived in heaven. With his flaming hoops, archangels must leap through. Where are the angels with fangs that sever windpipes? Angel fangs around a black hole's neck, bought in the black market. Goddess Durga, who rides the sky tiger, forgive us. You could say the stick that makes my head jerk is a bad branch from the tree of life, but I swear there's a tree of good, if only I could find it for the cub that survived, whose claws are new moons that light up my path. And even though it's day now, the forest has drawn blinds over itself. I climb a hide, and as I climb, the trees grow higher. Banyan boles pierce the ladder and hiss like snakes with skeleton leaves. I pass choirs of langurs with silver fur and ebony faces, their echoing barks getting louder. But even up here, vendors are shouting 10 crore for a white tiger, 5 crore for a black leopard. Here, where the blacksmith forges leg traps in the night market. Here too there are trees with scratch marks, but no tigers. unless you count the meat without skin, all bones pulled out, for just one rib of barg can buy a cow. Let me tell you what I saw, let me whisper it. I saw an archangel with its paw mangled in a trap for what seemed an aeon. I saw a man waiting for it to weaken while he ate his meal on a teak leaf. And when he had finished, I saw him whittle a stick, and when the archangel was too weak to move, he jabbed his stick into its mouth so no one would hear its music. I saw him pick up a branch and batter the spine. And I knew then that the branch was from the tree of secrets. For how else did he know where creatures of light walk on our earth, their footprints that glow on the path, saying, this way to my kingdom. Then the man got out his skinning knife. Half an hour it took him to flay the hide intact with its arabesques of bulldozed gardens. If it were possible to remake the creature from its pelt, I would do it. But the man sold the pelt because his family was hungry. And I vowed then never to eat again. I descended the spiral ladder, and with bamboo thorns and plant fiber, I sewed my eyes shut. And with resin from the tree of love, I glued my lips.
This was wow. This was one of my favorite works from the book. It's it's such a passionate plea for compassion. I can imagine it must have been very, very difficult, almost gut-wrenching to write this.
Yeah, it kind of was, but it also just wrote itself. I kind of wrote it in a trance. I didn't know where I was going. I just went into this journey starting out, thinking I'm at the gate of the forest and I'm not allowed in the forest at night, but I am going to go in there. And I guess it's set about 10 years ago when there was a lot of poaching, and although some of those things still go on, but not at the same rate. Yeah, and I think in my mind, I was linking the animals that I saw with children as well, just with the innocence of the people who are innocent and who are in the thrall of those in power. So that's, I guess, where I was there.
It's a magical poem. It has that dreamlike quality, that quality of speaking through a trance, and it comes through. It is very vividly felt. At least I vividly felt it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this poem. What I also wanted to ask you here now was that to return to the personal layer of the book, before we move on to the more general, more universal parts of it, the eco poetry and so on, are these very slant looks at a colonial history, at a very fraught family history, at a against which this figure of the protective tigress becomes a protective the figure of the tigress becomes a protective symbol, so to say. Would you like to read out a few poems which deal with the family part of it?
Yes, let me think. I could read Her Globe, which is because my grandmother was very special. She had second sight, and a very powerful second sight. So she used to tell fortunes. This is why she's addressed as a gypsy. And she used to tell fortunes at fairs. And I I asked, I would accompany her actually, but I would ask her, what do you use, and so she said, oh, well, I use a globe, and I use the tarot pack, and and she could tell tea leaves, but she said, to be honest, those things are just props because I can see into the future without them. But I wanted to have this image of her. Well, and so that's what the core of this poem is, the image of her with the globe in front of her. And of course, it's a globe. So she's kind of remaking the world.
Yes.
And the power of that, and also that in it is the time that I spent with my mother, who was very mentally ill and couldn't really look after me, and who didn't really love me. And so there's that tension there, and the fact that my grandmother could heal that. Her globe, this amber emerald globe, its metamorphic luster, the chrysoprase of its chatoyant forests, crystal thickets echoing with alarm calls, streaked with ultraviolet urine, territorial scat, hotspots where a cheetah's hooves have sparked. Every time she tells the future is a ride into the convex mirror of a tiger's eye glowing in the tented dark. Her customer just a flicker on the sea's horizon. Your grandmother was a witch, my mother says, deep and sly. I evade her grasp by sliding into the scrying ball's fire. Cicadas shrill in the branch tunnel above me, and the hawk cuckoo drills his brain fever chant, a rising scream auguring rain. Monsoon season, when central India's national parks close and the jeep tracks flood quicksilver. Tigers lounge in flash pools with their cubs. Bitri, the ravine tigress, abandons her cave to splash in the shallows. Shy Bitri, meaning the deep place, screened fissure where unnamed trees thrust through glass groves of torrential showers towards the light. Even her mother, Banbay, is flushed out, descendant of Sita, pride of Bandavgar, the first to survive long enough to found a dynasty before the poachers got to her. My grandmother sits in the fair's fortune-telling booth, decked in her gypsy veils. They whirl around her like cumulus clouds at sunset. I hunch in the corner while flame-backed woodpeckers flash past to drum on lightning trees. The last ribbon of alto cirrus is a paradise flycatcher's tail streamers. The crystal ball pulses in Gran's hands. Her face floats on the surface, then is sucked in, as if our earth has inner globes nested inside, whirlpools of spiraling planets opening their diamond minds, and she the only adventurer to brave their deeps. Your Gran was a witch, Mother repeats, and you take after her. I stare into space until the globe appears, can feel it heavy on my lap. Soon I'm back in the forest maze where Gran is my guide. With all her power, I pass into the future, leaving only a trace of myself, like dust on the surface of a mirror.
So beautiful, so beautiful. And that ending, my God, the ending with Gran the tigress. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. Well, that is based. I saw a lot of tigresses, and in Tala zone in Bandhavgarh. There is Bitri and Banbay, who are sharing the ravine in a very mountainous area. And we'd often go there in the Jeep and watch them go out and come back. But I believe now they're rivals, so it hasn't lasted, the entente.
That is inevitably how these things happen, I guess, with tigers, and
Yes,
unfortunately with people sometimes. But
yes, indeed, yes. When the one without power gets power, maybe, I don't know.
yes, and that is one of the theme. That is one of the themes underlying the books. It's not stated in so many words, but
Mm,
but the way in which the book is saying, that you are saying through the book, that the way in which these animals are treated has also got to do with the way in which the modern world's forces are rubbing up against each other, of commercialization, of
yeah.
need, of deprivation, but also of patriarchy.
Yes, absolutely. As patriarchy, and also the capitalism and poverty, and how it becomes almost impossible to protect forests because they're needed. It's the same with the Amazon rainforest. They're needed for cattle ranchers, and I saw in central India the terrible poverty and the absolute necessity that elephants and elephants must not go through the crops, and tigers must not kill the cow, so, or the bison. So it's so heartbreaking, really. But that also, I saw how people like the tribal peoples, like the Gond, whose culture seems to worship tigers and animals and the forest, turning against it, so because they're taken out of their forests where they were happy, and now have to manage with crops and buying food.
Absolutely, and some of the most vivid details in the book are precisely those, where you describe how these animals are killed, with a tar bomb. That
Yes.
is such a horrible. That is one of the most affecting images that I've ever seen in a poem. Because it is so easy to imagine how it's going to stick to the animal and work its devastating effects on it.
Price photograph, yes. So that, of course, was the very famous photograph by Biplab Hazra of the farmers hurling tar bombs and firecrackers at a mother elephant and her calf, and she was shutting her ears and rushing across the road, not realizing that the calf was on fire. But I mean, he later said that the calf did survive and wasn't too badly burned. So I was very relieved to hear that. But you do see these awful images and
Yeah,
photographs
yeah,
of
absolutely,
what happens.
absolutely. Would you like to read that poem?
Oh, sure. Oh, where has that poem gone? I'll have to look it up in the index.
That's perfectly all right.
It's here somewhere. I had it a minute ago. So prize photograph. Where did I put that in the book? There it is, 73. Prize photograph. And this wild elephant crossing State Highway 9, his footprints, lakes for dragonflies and bees, does not yet know the chaff of a howdah, ankle chains, or the sting of the bullhook. His mother is ahead, her ears flapping for his rumbles that she also feels through her feet. Only now her feet are burning, and she's closed her ears to the firecrackers, the jeers of the mob protecting their fields. Already one farmer has hung himself when his crop and home were trampled. How could he feed his family? And one woman has been crushed to death. The men lob tar firebombers at the invaders. Go back, Jungly Hathi, they shout, banging on tin drums. The matriarch runs from the noise, doesn't hear her calf scream, his back legs alight. Hell is now and here, the caption will say, as Biplap Hazra clicks the shot of his life.
So powerful, so very powerful. And it's just the details, it's a poem that's built on great emotion, but it's also built on so many details. There were tar bombs, there was Biplav Hazra, the hind legs did catch fire.
Yes.
The matriarch did go on ahead and she didn't know what had happened.
Yes.
And these people were trapped in this animal conflict, man-animal conflict, which
yes.
is the great tragedy.
Yes, and I mean, and the elephants are in such a bad situation because unlike tigers, tigers have a territory, a large territory, but they don't migrate, and the elephants need the migration corridors. So so yeah, I mean, I saw some wild elephants in Bandhavgarh because they had to shut Tala Zone until just before I arrived, in fact, because they were there and they had some babies. So they were quite aggressive to jeeps. They shut it. But the question was, they're not supposed to be in Bandhavgarh, so what were they doing there? And they were obviously, you know, locked out of their usual routes.
Yes. Now that you mentioned Bandhavgarh, can I quickly ask you how many times you went there, and what was the process of absorbing all that so that it eventually came out as poetry or in poetry?
I went to Bandhavgarh on 2 separate trips, but each time I'd go with my husband, who would take photos for me, and I had a little notebook, and the jeep would be, you know, going around like this, and I'd be writing as we were kind of going over all the rocks and across the rivers. So let me think. The first time in Bandhavgarh, we must have gone, I don't know, say about 20 different safaris. So the morning safari, you get up at 4 and you're at the gate just before dawn, and then you come back around between 11 and 12, and you have breakfast at 9 or 9:30, as you're on the road all the whole time. So they're very big, these forests, and the actual, as I'm sure you know, the tourist zones are only 20% of the tiger forests. Then the second time I went, maybe about 30 safaris. So it was very intensive and just so exciting. I mean, you just want to leap out of bed, and you just can't wait for the gate to open and to hear the sounds of the forest and see the tracks. So it's just wonderful, and to have at some point Spotty. So she had a calligraphic T here, so she's called Spotty, the tigress. She came almost right up to the jeep, you know. So
oh my God.
Yeah, and then she was just behind, and I was standing on the back seat, and I said stop, because the driver wanted to go because it wasn't safe anymore. And I said no, stop, and he said no, we're going, sit. Because of course it's dangerous. She was a very calm tigress. Some of them were very, very jeep shy, really, and others are really quite calm, and they'd kind of grown up with them. But I still think it does stress them. So I could see that actually in her eyes. She seemed to be trying to see round us and escape from us, I think, really. So it's a double-edged thing, that the tourists bring in money, which means that the forest guards can look after the forest and bring money to the region, but the tigers, I think, do suffer.
Yes.
So there's a balance to be had.
So true, so true. And but also, was it on one of these trips that the sort of the germ for the collection sort of took place?
Oh no, I'd already started writing the collection.
Oh, wonderful.
But so the early poems in it, about my grandmother, I was writing, and then I thought, of course I've got to go there. It's just I had to, and I'd never been to India before, and I actually really quite fell in love with it. We both did, and I don't know what's going to happen now, because of course what's happening with nature and with the pandemic now is also to do with the imbalance with nature, and flying is an issue, and so I really don't know if I'd ever be able to go back.
Hopefully you will, and hopefully we at Pen at Prithvi will be able to host you in a real live physical event. And hopefully you'll get to see all the forests that you want to. And speaking of which, it might interest you to know that Bombay, or Mumbai as it is now known, is one of the few cities in the world which borders a national park.
Ah, yes.
So, and we have in that national park around 10-15 years ago, there were 20 leopards.
I'd read that, yes. Yeah, leopards. Oh, yes.
And it was there was all kinds of, and they were hunting. They were actively hunting on the outskirts of the city. So there were parts of the outskirts of the city where people never ventured out of doors after dark. It was very surreal, because only 10 minutes away there was a railway line. There were all the facilities of a city, and 10 minutes in you have leopard land.
Yeah, wonderful. But it's frightening.
Yeah, it is very frightening, but
especially for small people like me, because they'd go for women on their own, or
people who are stooping or bending over for whatever reason, they think they are deer and they leap at them. But so that's one of those things that that you see in the whole man-animal conflict situation. So also, in fact, one of the themes from your book, now that we have 20 minutes left, I'll speak less and so that you can read more. But one of the themes of the book is, again, that the way we treat each other and the way we treat nature are really one and the same, in a sense, because personal trauma is often juxtaposed with environmental degradation or cruelty to animals in your poems in this collection. Do you want to sort of read out a poem which maybe brings that out?
Yes, I think so, yes. I think I'll read Jungle Owlet, which is because this is about how my grandmother threw me out, and I had to go and live with my mother, which was a very unhappy time for me. And what is done to owls, and because they're good luck charms. So Jungle Owlet. What you didn't tell me is how poachers cut off their claws and break bones in one wing so they can't perch or fly, that their eyes are sold as pujas, boiled in broth, so herdsmen can see in the dark. You didn't say how sorcerers keep their skulls, their barred feathers, their livers and hearts, or how they drink their blood and tears. You didn't mention how a tortured owl will speak like a young girl to reveal where treasure is buried. My kind granny, who took me in when I was homeless, who sat down this very evening after I had gone to bed and wrote mother a stern letter telling her that she must take me back. It doesn't matter where, Paris, Wales, Timbuktu. No more excuses. You are tired. And here your slanted writing is almost illegible. But what I think it says is that you cannot look after a teenage owlet. You use your favorite pet name. I've never spoken of this before. I call it up my gullet from the pit at the bottom of my 13th year, along with my crushed bones, my stolen blood, and I spit it out through my torn off beak in language that passes for human.
It's so moving. It's so powerful. It's this was one of the poems which which made me tear up a little bit. But it's so powerful, and it works on both those levels of. It's wonderful. It's really, really wonderful. Thank you so much for reading that poem out.
Yeah,
What would you like to read?
thank you. There's the teenage, as my cat is starting to meow. There's the teenage, and the teenage cat. No, she's mature, and because at first I actually thought that an owlet was a young owl, but of course it's a day flying owl, so it isn't. But that was then I used it as the teenage owlet. Hey, mouse, you have to be quiet now.
In India, of course, you know this, but in India, the cat is known as the tiger's aunt.
Ah, the tiger's aunt.
At least in my language, my first language, our grandmothers used to joke around saying that, oh, look, there's the tiger's aunt, and they used to point to cats.
Yeah.
So quite a synchronous entry by your entry by your cat into the session. But what would you like to read next?
I think I'll read a relatively happy poem. Green Bee Eater, which oh yes. So yeah, and I went to Jaipur. I'm not really a city person, but I couldn't resist going to Jaipur. Green Bee Eater, more precious than all the gems of Jaipur, the green bee eater. If you see one singing tree, 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 with his space black bill and rufous cap, his robes all shades of emerald, like treetops glimpsed from a plain, his blue cheeks black eye mask, and the delicate tail streamer like a plume of smoke, you might dream of the forests that once clothed our flying planet. And perhaps his singing is a spell to call our forests back, tree by tree by tree.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a fills you with hope, so to say.
Yes, that's the hope, isn't it? There has to be hope, I think. And I think that I felt that all the marvelous birds that were in the forest seemed to indicate hope. They augured hope for me. And there were so many marvelous ones. So I'd also like to read the Indian Paradise Flycatcher, if I may,
Yes, please, please.
because that was just such an incredible bird. And we could not catch it in the camera. It's much too fast. And this was like in the height of summer. It was incredibly hot. And to see this really snowy bird there was incredible. Indian Paradise Flycatcher. Your tail, 2 comets of ice crystals. Your face, a night blue sheen, as if dipped in starlight. Your wings, snowdrifts from a past climate. You descend in a heat haze, and when you dip into a pool, you're a pen sky writing on a mirror, a flick of flakes melting, a jet's contrails telling us about a sun fueled by frost. Too fast for my eye, your tail streamers weave an alphabet to cool the earth. You dinosaur relic, little white flag from the Holocene.
Wonderful. I remember another of your poems from the collection in which there is this bird with its tail like a lyre.
Yes, that's a bird from Australia.
Would it be a drongo?
Oh no, it isn't. It isn't a drongo. It's this superb lyrebird. So it's.
Oh yes.
This was. Let's see. It was the Christmas before last when there were terrible fires
Yes,
over
yes,
the
yes,
whole
yes.
planet.
Yes.
And so these birds were threatened.
Yes, yes, yes.
The superb lyrebird. So shall I read that?
Let me quickly ask the administrators. We have 7 minutes to go. If there are any questions from the audience.
Oh yes, let's do that. Yes.
Are there any? Okay, no questions from the audience. So I guess we can go ahead with the poem if you like.
All right. The superb lyrebird mimics a kookaburra, dingo bark, growls of koalas. Ground dweller, poor flyer, flees on foot or freezes when faced with threat. To make his lek, he clears bushland of brush that sparks wildfires, nature's forester. He flips his tail plumes over his head, 2 lyrates and a smoky fan of quills that he shakes in sync with his song, a medley of camera shutters, crying babes, car alarms, rifle shots, repeats them between bursts of rainbow finch, cockatoo, galah. Then trees creaking in wind, gusts through their crowns. When the flames come, he fast forwards a repertoire of all the songbirds his ancestors learnt. Fairy wren, jewel babbler. Even now, he's dancing to new sounds. Waterplane crash, firestorm surge, his superb lyre alight.
Wow, that's... So there is a question.
Yes.
So somebody said goosebumps. Can we scroll up a little bit? Okay. Skenda Singh said goosebumps. She said love. She said, I'd like to know how and why Pascale started to write about her grandmother and if she could share a little bit about her creative process.
Thank you, Skenda. Thank you so much for coming too. I started to write about my grandmother because, as you may know, I'd already written 2 books about my mother and 2 about my father. And they were kind of the bad parents. So I think I just felt in the right place in my life that I could write about the good mother. So I think that that's what it was that started it. And also, I think at the very beginning, I was very lured by the idea of the tiger, because I have a thing about big cats. So I thought, yes, I think I could move. I could leave my jaguars for a while and dare to do the tigers. And of course, I'm kind of put off by, the great Blake poem, The Tiger. Tiger, tiger, which kind of hovers behind some of the poems, like that long poem. He's there hovering with the archangel and the fire hoops in heaven, I think. And so the other question was the creative process. I have so many different creative processes. I can say I said a little bit about that long poem in the forest that I literally, first of all, I did lots and lots of research. And of course, I'd already been to India twice when I wrote that. And so I spent all this time absorbing, and I had my little tiny notebooks and lots of photos to look at to remind me of all the senses. And so I wrote that poem pretty much as it ended up, hardly any editing, which is not what I advise my students to do, but it did seem to be written in a trance. So if I'm very lucky, I write in a trance. Other times, I will have a poem like the last poem in the book of Tiger Girl, which is Walking Fire. And that took a long time to write, where I talk about Spotty coming right up to the Jeep. I talk about my relationship with my grandmother and so many other things, the whole geology of the earth there in that poem, and the magma and the deep fire. So to bring in so many elements, I think that took me a lot of restarting the poem. So I would write a poem and then I'd think, no, that is an okay kind of poem, but it's not what I'm really after. And so it's kind of being very bulldogish about, like a bulldog, tenacious about trying to recast a poem until I get there. So sometimes it's really hard and sometimes very easy. And there are some in between.
That was very, very interesting. And sometimes it takes years and sometimes it happens like that.
Yeah, sometimes there's a poem that's I long ago discarded. And then I'll come across it and I think, oh, that's about something else, or I can bring something else to that.
Yes.
Yeah, and then with more as well.
Absolutely. And let me quickly also tell the people who are listening in now and who will be listening in on YouTube that her book is available now. It came out in 2020. It's available on Amazon, both as a physical. There it is. What an utterly beautiful Gond. I believe it's Gond art, is it not?
It is. It's Jangar Singh Shyam.
Oh, he's a very famous painter.
And it's the tiger and the boar, the story of the tiger and the boar.
Wonderful, wonderful. So her book is available both as a paper copy and as an ebook.
Yes.
So please buy the book. It will change the way you look at eco poetry and perhaps at poetry. And thank you so much for today's session. It was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And thank you so much for inviting me, and for me to be even virtually in Mumbai is
Yes.
wonderful. Very near to some leopards.
Yes, absolutely.
I hope to see you one day.
Yes, absolutely. It would be wonderful. And
Thank you for listening.
so thank you so much for joining us. This is Pen at Prithvi, a fortnightly program, a fortnightly virtual program where we speak with writers from India and beyond, writing in English and other languages. Please follow us on Instagram and on YouTube. On YouTube, we are our handle is Pen at Prithvi Webcast. On Instagram, we are at Pen at Prithvi. Please also follow Pascale Petit. She's on Twitter, where she's very active. And we will be uploading this session to YouTube as well. So stay tuned for more. And thank you so much, Pascale. I hope to someday meet you and get my copy signed by you.
I hope to meet you too. And thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.